It's very early too. I'm very happy to see the name of some friends here. And I hope you can all see my screen. I'm going to change to my presentation so I can also see it. And then I will not be able to see everyone. We're experiencing a little bit of issues with the internet. So if for any reason you cannot hear me or see me, or there's any issues with the presentation, can you please let me know through the comments or just speak up because I will not be able to see everyone. So thank you. So today we're going to talk a little bit about our experiences with responding to the river dolphin unusual mortality event that happened in Brazil in 2023 and some of the lessons that we learned. And our main objective is to share everything that we learned with all the colleagues everywhere that may experience similar events so everyone is better prepared and we can work together and in collaboration to be better prepared for dolphin conservation, marine mammal conservation during the climate crisis that we are experiencing. So during this mortality event, I served as the leader of the team that was responsible for the rescue and for the care of animals that were in distress if that was needed. But we are going to talk about different aspects of this mortality event. And I also wanted to point out that Dr. Miriam Marmontel, I'm not sure if she's here already, but she will definitely be. She was the chief of operations of this response, leading many groups and coordinating the whole response. So I'm sure she will offer a lot of important insights about this that we can then discuss during the question session. Um, Sorry, there is messages that people are waiting in the group to be entered. I will just not allow those now. So if someone can please let them in, that's great. So I wanted to also start reminding us that the unusual mortality event that happened in 2023 to the Amazonian river dolphins was directly linked to climate change and an extreme drought that happened in the Amazon. And this drought was the most intense and widespread in the history of the Amazon. And in 2023, during the UME, the Lake Tafet, that was one of the areas affected by the UME, reduced up to 75% of its volume. Here in these two images in the bottom, we can see the portion of the Rio Negro. And in the first image, we can see how it was in September 13, and less than a month later, in October 8, the same area. So this extreme drought really had very severe effects in the ecosystem, and it also caused a humanitarian crisis in many areas of the Amazon. So the mortality event of river dolphins was definitely not isolated from all the effects in the ecosystem of the Amazon. Um, the massive and unprecedented mortality of river dolphins was associated with the highest ever recorded water temperatures in the Amazon that reached up to 41 degrees Celsius. Very hazardous air quality that was due to wildfires in the area, and also algal blooms that were associated with all the environmental changes that were observed. And in this UME, we lost more than 300 river dolphins that died in two different lakes in the Amazon between September and October. And they were of both species that happen in that area, Inia geoffrensis and Sotalia fluviatilis. And this was devastating for the conservation of these already declining species. And we estimate the loss of up to 10% of the population in the affected area. And that isn't the most scary part of this event. What is really scary is the fact that this event is unlikely to remain an isolated event. We already know from multiple studies that with the climate change, more frequent and more intense extreme environmental events are going to happen. And with those, we expect an increase in UMEs, or unusual mortality events, of marine mammals everywhere in the globe, and also of life strandings. Um, and not only unusual mortality events that are directly linked with the environmental changes, such as what we observed in 2023, but also we know that climate change is also expected to intensify episodics, and then this can lead to more frequent disease or infectious disease related UMEs of marine mammals. So, unfortunately, right now, the question is not if another event or another UME like this is going to happen, but when it's going to happen and where. And knowing that what we can do is to prepare ourselves, and we can do that through training and through collaborative learning from experiences in capacity building. And I wanted here to mention that these are the main goals of the International River Dolphin Veterinary Network. That is an initiative that is being led by the National Marine Mammal Foundation with many partners in South America and in Asia. And the main objective is to advance river dolphin health understanding. These are species that we don't know a lot about yet, and all of them are under the threats of extinction. And we want to do that by strengthening collaboration and fostering knowledge exchange, building technical capacity in each region through training, and with that providing and also providing specialized consultation, and that will also help us be more prepared to respond to similar events and other emergencies that may happen with river dolphins. And this is exactly what we are doing here today. We are learning collectively from the past and from this very devastating event to better prepare for the future collectively. And now moving to more specifically the Amazonian river dolphin UME response that we put together in 2023. I wanted to, sorry. Okay. I wanted to start pointing out that this was a very comprehensive response, involved a lot of people, a lot of partners, and it was only possible because of that, because of all the collaboration, not only from many institutions in Brazil, in South America, and everywhere in the globe, and some of them, not all, are listed here. You will see that this was a lot of work. I'm not going to present everything. We're going to focus on some areas, but it was a lot, and it was not going to be possible if it was not for all the collaboration from all these institutions. We received consultation and expert support from everywhere in the globe, donation of equipment, donation of resources, in-person support, and this was really critical so we could have the response in the extent that we had. And that involves, of course, all the amazing people that were dedicated to responding to this event every day. Not everyone is here in this picture. This is just a highlight, and to really honor everyone that was there in person or helping from afar. And just for everyone to have an idea, there were days that we had more than 120 people dedicated to this response. So this was really a team effort, and I wanted to highlight them and recognize everyone's work that made this possible. And I don't want to get too much into this because we have so much to talk about. But I wanted to mention CISO was a very important tool, but we had a lot going on at the same time to respond to this UME, and so many people involved that using the incident command system was very helpful to provide or to make sure that we had very clear communication and a clear structure for resource management and mostly decision making while we were in the field and we were responding to the event. And this incident command system was developed by firefighters to respond to big wildfire events, and it's now being used in the response to different emergencies everywhere in the globe, and it was very helpful for us. So here we can see what is proposed, the system that is proposed in the incident command system, and here I wanted to include, and we're not going to look into every box, but this was the UME response. So it was a very big UME response, and we have all these orders and this coordination of how the communication and the coordination of the UME happened. And like I said, we're not going to talk about all the aspects of this UME response, but we're going to focus, and I wanted to share with you mainly two aspects of this response that were the carcass response and the live animal response. So the carcass response included the carcass monitoring and recovery, and also the carcass processing and the sample collection. And then the live animal response involved the monitoring of the live animals and also conducting the rescue, providing treatment, and doing translocation of the animals that needed that. So, starting with the carcass response, it's usually the first step of a mortality event response, and it's also critical for us to understand the causes of this mortality event, of every mortality event. It's a great opportunity for us to collect important data and samples and information that are going to help us understand the cause of death, the cause of this UME, identify any emerging threats, and also guide the conservation actions and mitigation efforts that might be needed for that specific event. So, right when this response to this UME started, a team was put together to work only on the carcass monitoring. This team was responsible for locating, documenting, identifying, recovering, and transporting the carcasses to the necropsy area. So here in this map, we can see the area of Lake Tafé. It's a very vast region. There were carcasses everywhere, and it was very important to have this as a coordinated effort to monitor the area, find the carcasses, and really understand what to do in each situation. And depending on how the number of carcasses, we had to have multiple carcass monitoring teams working at the same time. And for this event and in Lake Tafé, we had daily monitoring of this whole area. And we did about 8 hours a day of monitoring, trying to locate the carcasses. And here in the map, all of these dots that we can see in different colors represent areas where the carcasses were found. So once the team that was doing the monitoring for carcasses found a carcass, the first thing they were doing or they would do is to photograph the carcass and the surrounding areas, and also to conduct an abbreviated inspection of the carcass to collect very important data that would be recorded in a carcass documentation form that we developed for this emergency, and we can see this form here. So important characteristics that needed to be evaluated and recorded for each carcass was, for example, the date when this carcass was found, the exact location, the composition condition of the carcass, the size, total length, and other characteristics that could be important to help determine the cause of death, or characteristics that could be lost during the transport to the necropsy area. Um, all the carcasses would also receive a unique identification number that would help us identify that carcass, and that same number would be used then to for the necropsy of that sample and all the necropsy forms, and also to identify all the samples that were collected from the carcass until we had all the results. And that would allow us to have traceability of where that result came from. One lesson that we learned in this UME and that is very important is that sometimes we have more carcasses than our team can realistically recover. And something that was very important for us to address that is to learn how to prioritize the samples. So we started prioritizing the fresh carcasses that would offer us higher diagnostic value and help us understand better the causes of the mortality and then mitigate this mortality if possible. So even if the carcasses were not all collected and brought back to necropsy, all of them would receive an identification number, and they would still go through an abbreviated examination and have their characteristics recorded in the files or the forms, and that would help us understand which carcasses to bring first to necropsy if we had to choose. And another thing that we learned is that in addition to the unique identification number that each carcass would receive, it was very important to also physically mark all the carcasses that were located and that were counted, especially if not all the carcasses would be brought back to necropsy. And that was critical for us to have an accurate count of the carcasses and understand the scale of the mortality event. That would marking the carcasses would then allow us not to count the same carcass twice or to lose carcasses and not know the correct number of carcasses. And this was definitely a learning curve for us also on what to use to identify to mark these carcasses that were going to stay in the field. So in the beginning, we used these types of tapes that were tied around the fluke or the dorsal fin, the pectoral fins of the animals, the dead animals. But we learned that they wouldn't stay for too long, and sometimes we would lose these tapes, or vultures could break the tapes and we would lose them. We also used these cattle paint sticks. They worked, but they were less effective, and we noticed that they were losing the color very fast, even though we were using the all-weather type and types that were specific for warm weather. We didn't find them very effective. What was better and we thought was the best way to do this marking is to use roto tags or these cattle ear tags that we can see here that already have a unique identifying number on them. And then we learned during the emergency response from collaborators that came from other institutions in other countries that there are also these tags that at the same time that we apply them, they are able to collect tissue samples. So they come with this vial that we can see here that allows for the collection of the sample. And that is very helpful because at the same time that we are marking the carcass, we are at least collecting a small sample that can be saved and then used for genetics, for example. And even if we lose that carcass and we're not able to retrieve it later on, we already have a sample from that animal that goes with all the data that was already recorded in the forms for each carcass. And then after all of this, the monitoring team would collect the carcass and bring it to the necropsy area. And here I wanted also to point out the importance of using personal protection equipment or PPE, especially during mortality events where we don't know what the cause of mortality is, as a safety measure for all the responders. And here, starting to talk about necropsy, there is more important lessons that we learned. So in the beginning of this response, the carcasses would be brought to the Mamirawa Institute necropsy room where the necropsy would happen. But with the number of carcasses increasing very rapidly, it was observed that these wouldn't work very well, especially because having to bring the carcasses to the institute would mean that the carcasses were transported by boat, then had to be transported inland inside the city until the necropsy room. And that was a long distance transport that was taking a lot of resources and people. And also, there was not enough space to accommodate all the carcasses and all the necropsies that need to be done at the same time. And to address that, what was done was the creation of a field necropsy tent in the field or closer to the response area. And this is what we can see here in this image. This necropsy area was actually three tents that were put together, and these tents were offered by the army. They put this together for us to use during the emergency. So again, the need for collaboration and everyone working together to make the response possible. And this allowed us to have a shortened distance to transport the carcass, and also allowed for us to conduct multiple necropsies at the same time. This was critical for us to scale the response to match the demand that we had. And I also wanted to highlight how we organized the necropsy area, starting by the carcass receiving area. We did that to have more coordinated and organized efforts, and also to avoid contamination. So the carcass receiving area was divided into two different areas that were outside of the tents that we saw. And one area was where we would receive the fresh carcasses, or the carcasses that had priority for necropsy. And as much as possible, we try to always have ice in this area. And here we can see a bucket that was filled with ice with a fresh carcass that was in it, waiting in line to be necropsied. And this would help us keep the carcass as fresh as possible and have better quality samples that would then help us have better diagnostic results. We also had a separate area that was designed for receiving the composed carcasses, and we tried to keep this area organized by the composition condition of the carcass. That would help us really save time and resources when we had the opportunity to collect multiple necropsies at the same time. And then moving to the tent areas of this field necropsy area, we had three distinct areas. One was the clean area that we can see here. This area was clean. There was no samples or animals or carcasses going in this area. This was an area that was used for the staff to put on PPE and also to take breaks, to rest, to hydrate. And this was very important because we were dealing with very extreme environmental circumstances and conditions. We also had in the necropsy area that we can see here. This is where we conducted all the necropsies and the sample collection. And both the necropsies would mostly be done in tables, but we had to also do many necropsies using tarps, and that allowed us to have more necropsies at the same time. And the third area of the tents was our area for sample and supply storage and organization. So this was also a kind of clean area where we would identify of all the samples, fill up forms, and have all the samples and supplies organized and stored in the correct way. And finally, we had our carcass disposal area. This was where we would put all the carcass remainings and the contaminated material, and that would be stored that for the proper disposal. And all the disposal was done following the local biohazard regulations. And we counted with very important support from the city hall to do the disposal of the carcasses. You can imagine 300 carcasses is a lot for us to be able to organize and dispose of correctly. And here I wanted to show another picture that shows better the necropsy area here, where we have four necropsies happening at the same time, two in tables and then two in tarps. And then here is our sample and supply storage area. And again, like I said, sometimes the number of carcasses exceeds what we are able to analyze and to respond to due to limited time during an emergency, limited personnel, and limited resources. And to address that, what we did is we implemented necropsy protocols that were based on the decomposition condition of each carcass. And that really helped us prioritize the time and the resources that we would put into examining the carcasses and sampling the carcasses, focusing on the freshest carcasses that were more likely to provide us with better diagnostic information. And that meant that the sample type and the number of samples that we would collect from each carcass would be adapted to the condition of each carcass. And that really improved the efficiency of our response also. And here I wanted to very briefly show how what this necropsy and sampling protocols were depending on the composition condition of each carcass, because Dipani mentioned that this is an area that could be of interest of this group. So here it's just showing that for the fresh carcasses that had little decomposition and offer the highest diagnostic value, we would conduct very detailed examinations, spend a lot of time and resources, and do comprehensive sampling. And we also put together forms of sample collection for each type of carcass or the composition condition carcass. And here is the form that we had for collecting samples for fresh carcasses. And multiple samples would be collected for histopathology, microbiology, genetics, molecular analysis, metagenomics, toxicology, contamination, and also for our sample bank. And this is having in mind that we didn't know exactly what was causing this UME, and that we wanted to have the highest amount of samples and diagnostic tests that we could to help us identify that. And then moving to carcasses that were code 3 or in early decomposition that also had a good diagnostic potential, but some tests were limited or couldn't be performed due to the initial decomposition. We also did very detailed necropsies and examinations, and the sampling was based on the condition of each organ, but usually could also be sent for histopathology, molecular analysis, toxicology, contamination, genetics, bone studies, and sample bank. Then moving to code 4 carcasses that were more extensive, extensively decomposed. There was still a lot of diagnostic value, but it was severely reduced. We then would do a limited sample of these animals that was also based on the condition of each organ that we would evaluate in the moment. And usually those samples would be saved and submitted for molecular analysis, limited toxicology, genetics, contamination, osteology, and also for the creation of the sample bank. And here we can see the form that we created specifically for those types of carcasses. And then moving to code 5 carcasses that are usually just bones and skin or mummified carcasses. We had a lot of those due to the environmental conditions. They we did, as part of our protocol, more simplified examinations of these carcasses. And although they have limited value for determining the cause of death in a mortality event, they are also very important and offer important samples that can be used for bone or osteology studies, genetics, and also contaminants. So we would also save samples from those carcasses. We try to collect samples from all carcasses. Of course, it would only depend on the capacity of our team and the number of carcasses that we had. And I also wanted to mention that for as many carcasses as we could, we would try to save the skeleton for our osteological collection and further analysis. And if we had too many carcasses, we would then try to save at least the skull of the animals. And after being collected, then the bones would be processed through maceration. That is a technique that uses water, plain water, to remove the remaining soft tissues and then preserve the bones. And once the bones were all cleaned and correctly dried and prepared, then they would be cataloged and receive again that same identification number that was assigned by the monitoring team when the carcass was found and be added to the osteological collection of the Mamirawa Institute. And here I just wanted to mention the importance of having osteological an osteological collection, especially in an UME. Sometimes it can be very frustrating to happen to be responding to an UME and only have carcasses that are severely decomposed. But even those tissues can offer very important information on the taxonomy, evolution, genetics, life history, and even pathology of these animals. And it's also very important to remember to and have in the protocols to save the teeth of those animals and submit them for age determination, because that can be very important in helping understand the age of the animals that were affected by that mortality event. And we are going to finish now the section on the dead animal response or the carcass response. But I really wanted to highlight and mention how important it is to create a bank of samples. And a mortality event can be a unique opportunity to have access to biological samples from species that sometimes we don't have easy access to. That is usually the case of most river dolphin species. And building a tissue bank is incredible and very important, not only because it offers us opportunity for additional analysis to be performed as new questions arise. So we not always have the resources and the opportunity to submit samples for all the diagnostic analysis that we would like to do, and saving those samples. We have the opportunity to do that later on when we have more resources, and that can help us better understand the cause of the mortality and then do mitigation efforts. And also creating this bank can offer us a long-term resource that can generate knowledge about the species and then help us guide future conservation efforts and management efforts that otherwise would not be available. And now moving to the live animal response, this was another very important area of the UME response. And although many carcasses were we were finding many carcasses all over the affected areas. There were also river dolphins that were alive and displaying normal behavior that were using these affected areas. And that is why we had to create teams that were dedicated to monitoring these animals. And although most animals were displaying normal behaviors, there were also reports of animals that were showing signs of severe distress in the affected areas, such as this animal that we can see in the video that is playing. We also had then the creation of a team that was dedicated to responding to animals that were in distress and rescuing them and offering supportive care as needed. So, to accomplish this, many professionals from multiple institutions from different countries and many experts that work with different cetacean species work together to create a protocol and a live animal response effort. Um, and this was with the main goal of monitoring the river dolphins that were alive and using the affected areas, carefully evaluating their behavior, having the opportunity and the resources to rescue these animals if they were presenting severe signs of distress, provide them with supportive care to stabilize their condition, and translocate them and release them in safer areas. So we put together a team for monitoring the river dolphins, and since the Lake Tafet was a very extensive area, we had to select the priority areas that would be monitored every day. And that was done by selecting areas with higher water temperatures, areas that had shallower waters, and also higher concentration of animals. So these were areas where we thought animals could strand more easily and also be exposed to the warmer waters for longer periods of time. The monitoring of the live animals would also be done for about 8 hours a day, every day throughout the duration of the UME. And the monitoring would mostly be done by boat, like we can see in this image, but also we found the need of land-based monitoring, especially in areas that were very shallow and that not all the vessels that we had available could reach those areas. And the monitoring team would survey the area, searching for any live dolphins and evaluating their behavior. And we were always communicating with the local community and receiving reports if they saw animals that were displaying any different behaviors or if there was any area of special concern that we should dedicate our efforts to. And if the monitoring team found animals that were stranded or displaying clear signs of distress, then they would observe these animals and record all the signs that they were presenting. That could include lateralizing or the inability to swim, thrashing, tachypnea, difficulty breathing. And all of these would be recorded in another specific form that we developed for this. And all of these forms, there were many forms, but this is to ensure that we were recording all the data and learning as much as possible from every situation during the UME. And the monitoring team would then, if needed, call in the rescue team that was formed by veterinarians and other professionals that were trained in cetacean medicine and handling. And the rescue team would first conduct a visual examination of the dolphin and evaluate if there was a need or even the possibility of rescuing that animal, usually based on human safety, animal safety, and also the environmental conditions. And if that animal was rescued, it would be brought into the rescue boat, and supportive care would be provided on the boat during the translocation to a safer area. And in our protocol, we designed it so that multiple procedures for stabilizing this animal would be conducted simultaneously. So once the animal was brought into the rescue boat, the first thing that the veterinary team would do is to conduct a complete physical exam and do blood collection of this animal. And the heart rate, respiratory rate, and the core temperature of this animal would be monitored continuously. We also designed then a supportive care approach for this animal, having in mind that our main hypothesis was that these animals were being affected by heat-induced illnesses. So just wanted to mention this here again, because for each UME, depending what is your hypothesis of what is causing that UME, the supportive care or the clinical methodology that is going to be applied is going to change case by case. But we planned that after collecting the blood, we would conduct or measure the blood glucose levels using a glucometer inside the rescue boat. And if there was hypoglycemia, then we would treat it with injectable glucose and also save the blood for further diagnostic testing that could be conducted after the animal was safely released. In the boat, we would also conduct IV or intravenous fluid therapy if that was possible, using a shock treatment dose. And if not possible, we would also do subcutaneous fluid therapy. And at the same time, we would offer respiratory support with oxygen therapy for the animals. As I said, our hypothesis is that these animals were suffering from heat-induced illnesses, and the core body temperature would be monitored all the time. So if needed, we would try to gradually reduce the core temperature of the animals by placing ice packs that were wrapped in compresses under the pectoral fins, spraying the animals with cold water, and another resource or tool that we learned during the UME response from collaborators that joined the response is the use of cool down wrap. That is this blanket that we can see here in this image. It was designed for horses, and it pulls the heat from the skin of the animal, helping to stabilize and reduce the body temperature. So we had those available, and we were trained to use it if needed. In continuing the supportive care, we could also administer vitamin E and selenium intramuscular in these animals, given the high likelihood of them presenting heat-induced or stress myopathy, and would also collect additional samples, and do other advanced diagnostics if it was possible or available, such as using an ISTAT, that is this point of care hemogasometer that would offer us information on the blood gas and the biochemistry of the animal in the boat before releasing, and helping us to determine what the next clinical approach could be, and also conducting ultrasound if ultrasound was available. We also had emergency drugs and a formulary that was put together and ready to use as needed. And then after the animal was stabilized and before releasing it to a safer area, we also had this important plan to mark the animals by placing a roto tag or a cattle ear tag, such as the one that we can see here in the dorsal fin of this animal. And this is the same type of tag that the monitoring of carcasses team would use. So it was very important for us to have a color code for each different team to use. So the live animal team would only use yellow roto tags or cattle ear tags to tag the animals that were rescued and were going to be released, while the carcass retrieval team would only use tags that were red. And here in these images, we can see green tags, and these are the tags that we use for our capture of wild, healthy animals for health assessments that are then released. This way, we would know easily if an animal, if a carcass show up, and if it was an animal that was rescued and released and then died, or if it was a carcass that was marked by the monitoring of carcasses team. And additionally, we planned to use or to place a microchip in the nuca region of all the animals before then being released as a secondary means of identification in case the roto tag was lost and this animal is recaptured, or if the animal died, there would be another way that we could identify the animal and understand that this was the animal that we saw presenting clinical signs, was treated, and then released back in a safer area. And now moving to the release of the animals, we did a study of the affected areas, so the Lake Tefé area and other adjacent areas. And we chose areas that were safer to release animals, and this was based on the depth of the water and the temperature of the water in those regions. So here in the map, we can see two of the regions that were selected as suitable for releasing animals after they were stable. And after releasing these animals, they would be monitored for as long as possible. And if needed, they could be recaptured and go to treatment again, depending on what they were presenting. And of course, we had also designed more forms to allow for all the clinical information of these animals to be recorded, and also to include the tag and the microchip number that was used to identify these animals, and also other information on the rescue and the release data of this animal. And as part of this live animal response, we were only able to rescue one tucuxi, but this whole effort and putting together the protocols was extremely valuable for us to be trained and to build capacity and to be ready to respond to emergencies. So as part of this response, we also conducted multiple trainings, and we can see here part of the team being trained. We did this almost daily or weekly, and we also did many drills under real field conditions, like we can see in this picture, to make sure we are ready to act if needed. This really help us be more prepared and more coordinated for future events that we know that are going to happen, unfortunately. And this takes us to the post UME work. So after all the response finished, we still had a lot of work to do, a lot of data to analyze, but I wanted to focus here on all the work that we did to put together and develop this very comprehensive and standard response protocols based on everything that we learned, with the goal of sharing this with other institutions and other groups that could potentially be responding to similar events. And in these protocols, we included a lot more information than what I was able to share here, including biosafety, data management, all the field forms, the lists of equipment that are needed to do a response similar to what we were able to put together, what we recommend for staff and what we learned is more needed for each team, the workflows, and I included here even one session of our protocols in which we studied where to have people stationed in a vessel during the rescue and translocation of the animal to make sure we were able to do everything that we planned to do as part of the protocol for stabilizing this animal. And these protocols are now available in Portuguese, and we shared them as quick as we could with other institutions that work with river dolphins in South America, in the Amazon, because we know they are probably going to experience this soon. But we are working now to have them also available in English to share with all colleagues that can experience similar events. We also put together different groups that are working on preparing for emergency and learning together from these past events. And this takes us back to how important it is to prepare through collaboration and through sharing experiences, and how this is what we are working on now through the International River Dolphin Veterinary Network. And our goal is to share expertise, to provide training, to develop and refine protocols that already exist, provide veterinary support to emergencies, and strengthen local capacity. During many of the workshops and meetings that we have, one thing that we always hear when we present protocols and we talk about this is that different groups have different capacities and sometimes feel not ready to respond in this way, but no one needs to respond to an event like this alone. Our objective is to have a strong network in which everyone can support and accommodate all the needs and make sure that the best response is provided so we can have better outcomes for the conservation, especially of river dolphins, but other species that are going to suffer with UMEs and climate change. And that is what I wanted to share with you today. I included here my email, so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if you want to talk about something, if you want to learn more about this network that the foundation is leading and establishing now. And just finish with this message that if we get prepared together for what's coming, we are also going to be stronger. Thank you so much.
Hi, Dr. Rodrigues. So I'm Kavya, and thank you so much for this incredible talk. It looks like an immense amount of work has gone through, and it's a lot of like really good information, and I think it's really useful for us to know all of this. So I will just be helping moderate this question and answer session now because Shripad had to leave. So yeah, I would encourage everyone to, if you have a question, please just unmute and ask Dr. Rodrigues yourself. Or if you prefer, you can also put questions in the chat and we can answer it that way too. I think we have something in the chat already.
Hello.
Priyank Patil. Yeah. Do you want to unmute and ask Priyank, or should we just read your comment?
Hello.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
I'm
sure, doctor.
I'm
Okay.
Dr. Dinesh Minete here. I'm from Mumbai, and we also have a sea turtle rescue network at Dahanu. But we also get some injured dolphins for rescue. So I just wanted to ask, like sometimes we feel there is some injury or there is some kind of inflammation is also there on live stranded dolphins. So in that case, what we should do? Like, shall we release the dolphin in the state what it is, or we should keep it in a proper captivity for further treatment? Just wanted to know, like, because most of the time they get tail injuries, inflammation in the muscles, so they can't swim properly even after drastic efforts to release them back into the sea, they come back. So I just wanted to know, in that kind of scenarios, what best we can do to save that dolphin.
Thank you so much for the question. Well, that is a very complex question and
Yes.
involves so much. It will depend on so many things, right? So that is also an issue that we had when we were putting together these protocols. One thing that we need to take into consideration is what kind of legislation is available for each region, right? So there are areas in which a rescue and rehabilitation of a dolphin species is allowed and is possible. There are areas where that is not possible. There are some recommendations from environmental agencies. Like in Brazil, we have clear recommendations on a lot what to do depending on each area, and we usually follow those. And it will also depend on what kind of resources and facilities are in place, of what kind of lesions there are. It is really complex. It needs to be evaluated case by case, but to take
Yeah,
an
but
animal for, sorry.
I know my question is very limited. Though we don't have a proper, uh, you can say, rehabilitation facility for cetaceans and marine mammals. We have a good facility for sea turtles. For that, we are doing our level best. But when it comes to dolphins, specifically, where we get live standing, and during live standings, if we notice that there is some injury or there is some internal muscle injuries where a dolphin cannot swim well, normally what we do is we evaluate from outside and we release them deep into the sea with the help of boats. Okay, because we can't keep them in this type of standing situation for very long time, and they if you'll try to get them out also, they collapse most of the time. So we normally try to release them back with the help of fishermen, and in front of us they go back. But I still feel as a veterinarian that they must be having some injuries because of banging on the shore. uh, there are a lot of stones are there in Indian scenario, if you'll see. So they bang on that and they get some injuries. So in that case, how we can reduce their inflammation or pain, or how to monitor, and what is the best thing we can do at this scenario right now, where we don't have a proper rescue and rehab center for these marine mammals.
So
That is
I
my
can
basic
I
question.
can answer you with what we had to plan for the
Mm,
same similar situation here. So for the river dolphins, in this area where the UME was happening, we didn't have a rehab center in place. So that's why we put
mhm,
together this plan to stabilize the animal as quick as we could in the field, try to have it stable and then released.
mm,
Um, and then a second stage of it was planning to have a rehab center, that like a small rehab center that we were going to build just to attend to a similar occurrence. So we
yeah,
put together, we are working on a protocol for this with like all the indications of pool sizes, water quality recommendations, medication, staff, everything that is needed, because it's a lot that is needed also to take this decision of taking an animal in rehabilitation,
mm,
to stabilize them and release. But that is the only other thing that I can think about. If we cannot stabilize the animal in the field and have this veterinary support there, um, and it's needed to bring the animal into rehabilitation, then there are some things that some minimum requirements that we need to have to be able to rehabilitate this animal there, and that requires staff, resources, and many other things. And here in Brazil, we also have, for some areas, we also have euthanasia protocols. I'm not saying that that is the case, but for some animals, for example, large whales that strand and that we cannot bring into rehabilitation and that cannot be released back in the ocean, then we have euthanasia protocols to make sure that we stop the suffering of the animal that cannot be released. So I think it's hard to really answer to your question, but these are like different alternatives that we can take into consideration to see what is the best for the animal welfare, and also to better understand the what is that this animal is suffering from. So what kind of diagnostics could be performed, so you can start understanding what is that you're seeing, if it's a capture myopathy, and how you can stabilize that before being able to release that animal back in the wild.
Thank you, Dr. Dinesh Kumar. We have a few more questions for you in the chat. So I think the first one's from Priyank Patil. He asks, when it comes to local fishing communities, what role can they play in detecting and reporting UMEs, particularly as climate change alters rivers?
That is an awesome question, extremely important. They are usually our main way of detecting this, especially depending on which area. If we think about the Amazon, the local community play a critical role. They know what is the normal and what when something is out of that normal. So in the case of the 2023 UME, the population was very important in reporting the carcasses that they were seeing. So seeing if in 1 year it's normal to see 5 carcasses of river dolphins in that lake, in one day having 7 carcasses is really alarming. And because the Mamirawa Institute has a very long and strong relationship with the local community, they reported everything that was being seen, especially because if we think about the Amazon, not all the areas of the Amazon have monitoring and institutions there and researchers there that are conducting that are in the field and able to appreciate these differences. So the local community plays a critical role. They were also very important in all the steps of the UME response. And we were able to apply some mitigation efforts and we tried to move animals from one area that was very shallow and that had very warm water, and the fishermen in the local community were the ones that were able to do that and use the nets and the boats and their knowledge of the area to do that safely. And we were also with the local community, Dr. Miriam Mormontel will be able to talk way more about this, but analyzing the area with researchers and the local community, there was also another mitigation effort put in place that was creating a barrier using traditional ways of isolating an area in the river so that we could avoid animals to get in an area where they could strand. So there is a lot that the local communities can offer. They are a huge part of a good emergency response. And now, one thing that we are working on is to have protocols that can be shared with the local community so they are able to quickly identify an UME, quickly report them, and also what they can do in very remote areas. So how to safely transport a dolphin if they are the only ones that are in that area, or how to dispose of a carcass if there are too many carcasses in an area that it's very difficult for us to reach. So there is a lot of work that that can involve the local communities.
Thanks, Dr. Rodriguez. We have a few more questions. Do people want to just unmute and ask it? I think we have a question from San, Santa Kumar. What preservatives shall we use for analysis of microplastics? What organs shall we take for the same? Is there any permissible levels on microplastic level?
So that answering to all those questions will depend on exactly what kind of microplastic pollutants you are looking for and what is the diagnostic methodology that you are going to apply. So we use in our health assessments and the bank of samples that we have, we look for phthalate esters that are part of plastic pollutants that we can track in the samples of these animals. And for this specific analysis and the technique that is used by the lab that we send the samples to, what we use is a portion of skin and blubber, more specifically blubber. It needs to be very, very fresh. So that is hard to do in carcasses that are already decomposing. And the sample needs to be kept in at least -80. So when we are in the field for that collection specifically, we use liquid nitrogen tanks and then put the samples in a ultra freezer or -80 freezer until we are able to send them to the lab.
Thank you. We have two
Ye-
questions from,
Yes,
yeah,
it's me. Can I ask? Hello, can you hear me?
yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I had two questions. First was during your course of, treatment, do you use antibiotics? Because eventually these animals are going to go back into, the natural habitat. So antibiotic usage is something I wanted to know if you guys do it. And the second question was, how do you compare oral hydration to subcutaneous? Because with, marine dolphins, of course, oral hydration is something that they keep as a top priority over subcutaneous. I wanted to know about that.
Yeah, sure. So about antibiotics, thinking about an emergency response, and it will all depend also, right? A lot of these clinical questions depend on so many other um, aspects of the presentation and the facilities and what's going to happen with each animal. So in a response like this, if we're trying just to quickly stabilize the animal, we did not have the plan to use any antibiotics during a translocation and for release of this animal. Mostly because in this case specifically, our hypothesis is that what the animals were presented was related to the heat, so to heat induced illnesses, and there was no need for antibiotics if that was the case. But thinking about an animal that is stranded and then is brought into rehabilitation and is presenting other clinical presentations and like incitations very often, respiratory infections, yes, then we could conduct treatment with antibiotics. And then there are the requirements and indications, usually depending on legislation in each area and indications of the environmental agencies for each area. But here in Brazil, we in the south of Brazil, I am at a rehabilitation center. We receive marine mammal cetaceans. We conduct their treatment during rehabilitation that can involve antibiotics or not. And once they are already stable and ready to be released, they can be released back safely. Um, Of course, it will depend on the cause and the presentation of each animal. And then your question about subcutaneous fluid therapy and oral fluid therapy, then that will also depend on the state of the animal. If it's an animal that it's very stressed and during transplantation, I wouldn't recommend an oral fluid, giving oral fluids, because the animal has higher chances of vomiting because of stress and then aspirating this, and that will lead to respiratory issues. That is why, and also in this very short term, short moment that we have, that we are transporting an animal, if we want to help him and rehydrate him, if the animal is presenting dehydration, IV or subcutaneous fluid therapy is going to be much more effective than the oral fluid therapy. But it can also be used depending on the case, depending on how long we're going to keep the animal.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wade, do you want to ask your question? Okay, I'll just read it out. So I think they say, I'm a pre-final year veterinary student from India. I'd love to be a marine vet in the future, but I'm not sure how to get into this field since marine mammals are not a part of our academic syllabus. Can you please share your experience on how you made it?
Yes, of course. That I experienced the same thing while I was in vet school. I knew I wanted to be a wildlife vet and work on wild animals rehabilitation, but I had no idea even that um, marine mammal or aquatic mammal medicine was a possibility for me, because it was not part of my world. I lived in the central area of Brazil, far from the coast. There were not a lot of schools that did any veterinary medicine focused on aquatic mammals. So I started studying diseases of wildlife, really liked that, and then got the opportunity to work with aquatic mammals in the Amazon, applying techniques of diagnostic to diagnose diseases and to work with infectious diseases, to understand the impacts of these diseases in these animals and other animals in the environment and humans. So using aquatic mammals as sentinels for infectious diseases and zoonotic diseases. And this really opened the idea of being able to work with aquatic mammals, and I pursued that through doing masters, a PhD, and then a postdoc, focusing on the study of diseases and the health of aquatic mammals. And yes, in getting to know amazing people and learning in the field and having the opportunity to work in the Amazon, that I started building relationship with people that were working in this field for a longer time, and then having the opportunity to learn more and to train, to practice, until I started really working specifically with this. So don't give up. And there is training for aquatic mammal medicine is not available everywhere, and that is why this is also something that we want to work on with this international river dolphin veterinary network. We want to make these trainings available for people that need it, for regions that don't have veterinarians that had any training for aquatic mammal medicine. So we really want to make sure that that can be done.
Thank you. I think that was very helpful and inspiring. Hope that helps with Wade. Um, we have, I just think, two more questions. One from Akash. In marine mammals, what organ samples should be collected for further analysis, and what is the proper procedure for collecting them?
Oh, that is a very, very big question. It will also depend. Um, if we're talking about a fresh carcass and a species like a river dolphin that we are still trying to learn a lot about these dolphins, about the species, and that every sample is very, very valuable into helping us to get this information. We try to be very comprehensive and collect samples of all the organs that we can, and how to preserve or to the procedure of collecting them. With that also depends on what we are going to analyze, and this is mostly talking about necropsy. I'm not sure if the question is for necropsy or live animals, but I'm thinking necropsy for organs, right? If we try to save samples, at least for histopathology, so those samples, we collect them in uh, respecting the measurements that formalin is going to penetrate and fixate the sample. And we save them in formalin and alcohol so they can be used then further for analysis of histopathology and physiology. And we also try to have frozen samples of all the organs that we can. That can be bigger pieces of samples, and that we need to have a cold chain to maintain the samples for a longer time. And then depending on each specific analysis that we want, then we can have other ways of processing the samples and collecting the samples.
All right. I think we have one more question from Ranjana. What are the protocols you follow to reduce stress during capture and treatment? Also, what's the mortality rate observed due to capture myopathy?
We don't have that data on the rate of mortality rate due to capture myopathy. There are more studies that are done in other species of dolphins. That is something that we really want to learn more, considering river dolphins, specifically if we think about Sotalia fluviatilis or the tucuxi, that is a species that we understand is more prone to capture myopathy, but it is an area that we still have a lot to learn. And if for the capture, to control stress, since these were like emergency rescue, bringing the animal in the boat and transferring it as fast as we could safely to a safer area. The main measures that we had to reduce stress were keeping the whole team quiet, calm, having only communications that are needed so we can all clearly hear what is happening with the animal, what we need, and not everyone talking very loud. We also had plan to use like umbrellas to protect the animal from the sun and from light that can cause stress. We also had planned specific speed for the vessels to transport this animal as fast as we could, but keeping in mind that we need to control stress, and being very fast could worsen stress and the clinical condition of this animal. These were the main things that and of course, offering all the support care that would also help reduce the stress of these animals. For this specific protocol that I shared today, we didn't plan to use any drugs to control stress because our main goal was to stabilize and then release the animal. And if we gave drugs to control stress, such as diazepam or other drugs, then that could make the release a lot more difficult and create other problems. So that's why we didn't have that included in our protocol for this specific session of the response.
Thank you. Uh, oh, there's just additional question to that. Did you have any visual barriers for stress?
Like covering the eyes of the animals or something like that. I would imagine that is something that we use for river dolphins in our health assessments, we usually covered our eyes with a soft piece of fabric that is kept very wet at all times to avoid any lesions. And we believe that that is going to help the animal not being so stressed and seeing all the movement around during a health assessment. That yes.
I just have another question maybe to add to it. So when you
Yes.
capture these dolphins, like, did you see any visible, I mean, once you got them on the boat and you had them, any visible stress responses that you immediately had to release some of them, or like, were there any in the sense of like how were they responding for you, like because you were bringing them in when they were already in a stressful situation, right, like as a rescue term. So was there any visible signs of increase in like body conditions that worsened any of these things in any of them? Like, I don't know how many dolphins you had to capture and release, and like just to know, understand what was the success rate of this rescue as well.
Yes. So for the mortality event response, we only rescued one animal. We were only able to rescue one animal. That animal died very quickly. It was already in a very, very bad condition in the water. So I don't have the response for that situation specifically, but we conduct health assessments that are led by the Mamirawa Institute in the same region in the Amazon here in Brazil. Um, and we conduct the captures of these animals, bring them out of the water, collect samples, and then do a physical exam, and then release the animals back in the water. So for these situations, we are always paying attention, and we have a veterinarian that is there just paying attention in all the signs of stress and during the general health evaluation of that animal to understand if it's going through too much stress and we will need to immediately remove that animal, or if the animal release that animal, or if the animal is doing well and we can safely conduct the sample collection and the exams that we need to do. So one of the things that we look for and that we have very established in our health assessment protocols is um, the monitoring of the heart rate, the monitoring of the breaths, the respiratory rate, the monitoring of the temperature of the animal. So if the temperature is increasing, the animal is out of the water. If we need to do something, if there is tachypnea or tachycardia that are going to show us that the animal is going through stress, or if there are any other changes in the behavior of the animal that we need to act. So we always have someone just focused on this and in the overall health of the animal to make sure that this is going to be very safe for the animals.
Thank you. I think we have one last question here. Uh, Dipani, I think, has messaged it. So I wanted to know how long the subdermal microchips last and which company do you all use?
So we don't have that question. We use the microchips in our health assessments, like I said, as a secondary form of being able to identify the animal and understanding if it's an animal that we captured before, so we can compare the data from each capture. But we never recaptured the same animal to understand how long the microchip is there. So we don't have that information, and we use microchips that are used for dog. So not a specific brand that is made for that. We also use satellite tags, but that is not available for all the dolphins, and that not all the dolphins can receive the satellite tag. So that's why we use the microchip also as another form of identifying these animals.
I just had two other quick questions. One was I love the conservative approach that y'all use, that y'all don't necessarily do oral hydration and y'all don't necessarily do antibiotics, and that the goal is really to release the animal back rather than to keep it in rehab if it's not really required. Because out here, I think in India, there is this whole thing about wanting to make rehab centers, but yeah, and these are concrete infrastructures on beaches, which are really not a great idea. So all those photos that you showed of the tents that y'all put up are just amazing, the makeshift structures. So that was really nice to see. I just wanted to ask about the release and the success of release. Like, let's say y'all have taken an animal into rehab and then you'll have released it once it's stable. Is it usually within a few days or is it shorter than that? And if there is a success, or do animals come back to the beach again? In cases where you have rehabilitated an animal after an injury or something and released it into the wild again, are these successful releases always, or has there been a restranding that happens of that individual?
That is so hard to answer also because it depends a lot on the species, the area on the globe that is rehabilitation efforts are happening. So for river dolphins, we don't have a lot of that information. We don't have many rehabilitation facilities that have river dolphins, and I don't have that experience here for Brazil like extensively. So we don't have like success rate that is available for river dolphins specifically. There have been rehabilitation centers in other countries that were able to rehabilitate and release animals, and we do that for other species. But that the successful rate also depends on why the animal came in, the age of the animal, the species, the area. So that is very hard to answer, and there's not like one answer for that. There are rehab centers in the U.S. that have like a very vast experience with other species. But that's not something that I can quickly answer now.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Of course.
Thank you so much for answering all the questions so patiently. And I think it was really lovely to hear your talk and to understand all of these things. It's very encouraging also to know that this can be done, even if it's going to take time with a lot of collaboration. So thank you. And I think for the rest of the questions, we can directly always email you for the further questions. So I think we can wrap it up now. So thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you so much, Dr. Rodrigues, for this session. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye bye. It was a
Bye.
pleasure.
Same here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Miriam and Forrest too. Hopefully we'll have you for another talks. Yeah. Thanks.